Hit and run is a tactic where you launch a quick attack and retreat before the enemy can strike back. It relies on speed instead of prolonged engagements. A couple of you asked how to use hit and run properly in Warhammer 3, so in this video I'll show you 4 common scenarios you'll run into during a campaign. Each one requires a slightly different approach, but the core principles never change. Once you understand those principles, you'll be able to use almost any fast army much more effectively, whether you are playing Beastmen, Wood Elves or any other faction. To make hit and run work, you need 4 things. First, you need a speed advantage or stalking units. You either have to outrun the enemy or avoid being seen entirely. If the enemy can catch you, then you're forced into a normal battle, and that's exactly what you're trying to avoid. Second, you need units with high burst damage. The whole point of hit and run is dealing as much damage as possible during a very short engagement before pulling out again. Damage over time effects usually are not ideal because they need time to generate value. Instead, you want damage immediately. Third, you need something that can tank or delay enemy army. This can be a powerful lord, a single entity monster, summons, or any disposable unit if necessary. The goal for them is not necessary to win the fight, you simply need something that can buy enough time for the rest of your army to attack and disengage safely. And finally, you need a bait. Its role is to convince the AI to move in the wrong direction. Sometimes one cheap cavalry unit can pull half the enemy army away from the actual fight. If that happens, it's already done its job. No matter which scenario you're in, your objective is always the same. You want to split the enemy army. A full army fighting together is almost impossible to hit and run effectively. An army spread across half the map is much easier. So you need to position your units on different sides of the enemy formation and watch how they react. The AI rarely moves perfectly. Usually it starts chasing whatever it thinks is closest or easiest to catch. Some units will usually stay behind enemy lines, and sometimes cavalry just runs ahead while the rest of the army falls behind. Those small mistakes are exactly what you're looking for, but you do not want to rush immediately. You want to wait until a unit is actually isolated. The bigger the gap between the unit and the rest of the army, the easier it becomes to destroy it before reinforcements arrive. So the patience is one of the biggest parts of playing hit and run successfully. Once you charge your target, the rest of the enemy army will immediately start moving forward, and now the clock starts ticking. If you kill your target before the main army arrives, that's great. If not, you need to slow down the rest of the army. And to do this, you move another fast unit close to them. So very often the AI will slow down, change direction, or completely abandon its current path to chase that unit instead. Even a few extra seconds can be enough to finish your target and escape. But if one of your units get trapped, do not panic. Sometimes sacrificing one cheap unit is much better than losing several expensive ones. Trading one unit so that the rest of the army can escape is usually a very good exchange. Your first targets should almost always be fastest enemy units, because speed is everything. As long as the enemy still has fast cavalry, flyers, or other mobile troops, they can force your army into fights you do not want. Once those units are gone, the battle becomes much easier. After that, focus on missile units. Hit and run armies often spend a lot of time repositioning, and every second you spend moving is another second enemy units can shoot at you. So removing ranged units gives you much more freedom to move around the battlefield. Spellcasters are another excellent target. A single strong spell can easily do more damage than several enemy units combined. Everything else depends on situation. If you're relying on cavalry or monsters, you should avoid anti-large whenever possible. Always think about which enemy unit limits your mobility the most. That's usually the unit that should die first. So there are 4 scenarios you'll encounter most often when you're using hit and run armies. The first scenario is when you're an attacker. The AI will usually stay in defensive position and wait for you. If you simply run around the battlefield, nothing happens. You need to force the AI to move first. The easiest way is dealing range damage with missiles or magic. The AI will not tolerate being shot forever, and eventually it starts advancing. Once this happens, the formation slowly begins falling apart, and that's when opportunities start appearing. If your army doesn't have range damage, you'll usually need a tank. Send those strong lords or monsters into center of enemy army, and while everyone is busy fighting that unit, your faster troops can start picking off isolated targets around the edges. The second scenario is when the AI believes it has stronger army. In that case, it usually pushes forward aggressively. This is actually one of the best situations to hit and run, because enemy naturally stretches itself while advancing. Some units sprint ahead, others get left behind. But the downside is that this requires much more micro. You're constantly moving multiple units, watching every direction and looking for isolated targets, while making sure that your army doesn't get trapped. The smaller the battlefield, the harder it is, because you simply do not have enough room to maneuver. The third scenario is when the AI has range superiority, and this is usually the hardest matchup. The AI will keep its missile units protected and constantly adjust its formation as you reposition. In this scenario, it's much harder to separate individual units. At the same time, every mistake you make costs health because enemy missiles keep firing. This is where having a tank becomes incredibly valuable. A durable lord can occupy a large portion of enemy army while your mobile units attack elsewhere. If you do not have a tank, you may need to sacrifice one unit just to create enough chaos for the rest of the army to work. Those battles are usually slower than the others. Wait until the enemy finally makes a positioning mistake. Eventually it will. The fourth scenario is if most of your army is talking, then the battle changes completely. Instead of chasing valuable units, the AI starts searching the battlefield. It spread its army in multiple directions, trying to reveal your hidden troops. Ironically, this makes your job much easier. The AI creates isolated targets by itself. Your only job is to avoid being detected until you're ready to attack. Once the enemy unit moves too far away from the others, surround it, destroy it quickly, disappear again, and repeat the process. This is one of the strongest forms of hit and run because the AI is doing most of the work for you. So hit and run works best with fast units that can deal a lot of damage and disengage reliably. Mass is usually more important than speed alone. A unit that's slightly slower but can simply push through enemy infantry is often much more stronger than an extremely fast unit that gets stuck after charging. Single entity monsters are some of the best options. They are difficult to pin down, deal excellent burst damage, and can usually escape even when surrounded. Monsters, cavalry, and infantry are also excellent because of their mass. And chariots are another great option. Most of their damage comes from impact hits, and they will do great on cycle charging. Mounted lords and heroes work extremely well because they are durable, mobile, and can often survive mistakes that would normally kill cavalry. And finally, any unit with stock is extremely effective at hit and run. So hit and run can be incredibly powerful, but is not equally strong against every faction. Armies with strong range attacks, lots of mobility, or durable front lines are usually much harder to deal with. It also requires patience, because most of the battle is not spent fighting. For the majority of the battle you will be repositioning, baiting the AI, waiting for mistakes, and only committing when you know you can win. If you try to force fights too early, hit and run usually falls apart. But once you get used to it and to its playstyle, you'll start beating armies that would be almost impossible to defeat otherwise. See ya.